I stood at the glass doors when my mother whispered that I could not afford this place. My sister blocked the entrance like I was a stranger. Then the security chief walked past them and looked directly at me. When he announced that my private level was ready, the lobby went silent. That was the moment I realized my family was trying to humiliate me inside a building they did not even know I owned. My name is Natalie Kelly, and standing on the pavement outside the Varelli house, I felt less like a daughter returning for a birthday dinner and more like a ghost haunting the scene of a crime. The building itself was a jagged slice of obsidian glass cutting into the uptown Charlotte skyline. 50 stories of aggressive luxury that screamed exclusion. It was the kind of place where the air inside was filtered to smell like white tea and old money, and the air outside smelled of desperate ambition. I handed my keys to the valet. He was a young kid, barely 20, and he took the fob with a reverence that told me he knew exactly what kind of car I was driving, even if my family would only see it as a rental. The wind whipped down the street, carrying the bite of impending winter, but the heat radiating from the lobby entrance was palpable. I adjusted my coat. It was cashmere, dark charcoal, cut to vanish rather than scream, and I walked toward the entrance. My sister Brielle was already there. She was not waiting inside the warmth of the lobby. She was stationed directly in the center of the double glass doors like a velvet rope bouncer who had taken her job a little too seriously. She wore a dress that was a shade of red too bright for the season and too tight for a family gathering. It was a dress designed to be looked at, to capture light, to demand attention. She held a gold clutch across her chest like a shield. I saw her spot me. Her eyes narrowed, performing a quick, judgmental scan from my boots to my hair. I saw the calculation happen in real time. She was checking for labels, for jewelry, for any sign that I had finally clawed my way up to her perceived level. Finding nothing flashy, she smiled. It was a practiced expression, the kind she rehearsed in the mirror to perfect the balance between pity and malice. She stepped forward, physically blocking the motion sensor that would have triggered the doors. "You cannot afford to step in here," she said. Her voice was loud. It was theatrical. It pitched high enough to carry over the idling engines of the luxury sedans in the driveway, ensuring the valet and the couple waiting for their car heard every word. I stopped. I did not flinch. I did not look down. I just looked at her. "Hello, Brielle," I said. She laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "Look at you," she said, gesturing vaguely at my outfit. "You look like you are here to apply for the housekeeping shift. Honestly, Natalie, did you even try? This is the Varelli house. A cocktail here costs more than your entire outfit." Before I could respond, a scent hit me. It was heavy, floral, and unmistakably expensive. My mother, Elaine, materialized from the shadows near the pillars. She moved with a gliding grace that she had perfected over 4 decades of social climbing. She hooked her arm through mine, her fingers digging into the muscle with a grip that was surprisingly painful. She leaned in close. Her perfume was sharp, chemical, and sweet. "Don't make a scene," she whispered. Her voice was low, intimate, terrifyingly sweet. It was the voice she used when she was furious, but needed to maintain the facade of the perfect matriarch. "It is your father's 65th birthday," she hissed against my ear. "Do not embarrass us tonight. We have guests, important guests. Just turn around and go back to your apartment. We will tell Dad you got stuck at work. He expects that from you anyway." I kept my face calm. I had spent 10 years training my face to be a mask of neutral professional interest, but inside, beneath the cashmere and the calm, my chest tightened. It was not pain. It was memory. My mind flashed back 10 years. I was 25. I was standing in the kitchen of our old house, the one they lost 2 years later due to bad investments. My father was sitting at the table, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking at my business school acceptance letter like it was a napkin he wanted to throw away. "You will never be more than service. Natalie," he had said. The words were slurred but heavy. "You do not have the head for ownership. You do not have the killer instinct. You are soft. You are meant to fetch things for people who matter." That was the night I left. That was the night I decided that I would never, ever let them see the balance sheet of my life again. I looked at my mother now. Her eyes were darting nervously toward the elevator corridor inside the glass, scanning the lobby. She was anxious. She was vibrating with a tension that had nothing to do with a birthday and everything to do with image. I gently disengaged my arm from her grip. "I am here to see Dad," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used in boardrooms when I was about to acquire a competitor. Brielle stepped closer, closing the gap between us. She was trying to intimidate me with proximity. "You are not on the list," she said. I looked at her. "The list I asked. It is a birthday dinner." "Brielle, not a gala." She smirked, looking over her shoulder at the concierge desk visible through the glass. "It is a curated evening," she said, using a word she had clearly heard someone else use and thought sounded sophisticated. "We have a private room on the 42nd floor. The guest list was submitted to security this morning. Your name is not on it." I looked past her, through the glass. The concierge was a young man named David. I saw him look up. I saw his eyes widen as he recognized me standing out in the cold. I saw the blood drain from his face. He reached for the phone on his desk, his hand shaking slightly. He was not looking at Brielle. He was not looking at my mother. He was looking at me with the terrified recognition of an employee who realizes the owner is being harassed on the doorstep. I knew the protocol. I wrote the protocol. If an unauthorized person blocks the entrance, security is supposed to intervene within 60 seconds. We were at 45 seconds. I realized then exactly what this was. This was not a family dinner. My mother kept glancing at the elevators because she was waiting for someone. She was waiting for targets. She was waiting for people she needed to impress. I was not just uninvited. I was a liability. I was the failure daughter, the one who worked in hospitality in some vague, undefined role, the one who could not afford the entree prices. My presence would ruin the illusion of wealth and success they were trying to sell to whoever was coming up those elevators. I looked at the security cameras tucked discreetly into the corners of the brass entryway. The small red LEDs were blinking. I knew the feed went directly to the command center in the basement. I knew the resolution was 4K. I knew that every word Brielle said, every sneer, every gesture was being recorded on a server that I paid for. I could have reached into my purse. I could have pulled out the black card that served as my master key, the one with the RFID chip that would override every lock in the building, including the penthouse. I could have flashed it in Brielle's face and watched her crumble, but I didn't. Words on camera become facts. Rumors are deniable. Documentation is not. I wanted them to speak. I wanted them to dig the hole so deep that when the light finally hit the bottom, there would be no way to climb out. "I am his daughter," I said, allowing a tone of confusion to enter my voice. "This feels unnecessary." "Brielle, it is necessary," she snapped. "You do not fit here. Natalie, look at the people walking in. Look at the staff. This is a world you do not understand. You handle luggage. You handle complaints. You do not handle this." She swept her arm to encompass the lobby, the chandeliers, the marble floors. Elaine stepped in again, her voice dropping an octave, becoming harsh. "Please," she said, "do not make us call security to remove you. That would break your father's heart." The irony almost made me laugh. They were threatening me with my own employees. I looked at the concierge desk again. David was on the phone, speaking urgently. He was looking at the security monitors. He was signaling. I noticed the tension in the staff inside. The bellman was standing too straight. The front desk manager had stopped typing. They were all watching the door. They knew who I was. They knew who Brielle was pretending to be, and they were waiting to see what I would do. I looked back at Brielle. She seemed so tall, so confident in her little victory. She thought she was guarding the castle. She didn't know she was standing in the moat. I took a small step back, giving them space. I let the cold wind bite at my face. I wanted to remember this feeling. I wanted to remember exactly how it felt to be treated like debris by the people who were supposed to be my foundation. "If I do not belong here?" I asked, my voice quiet but clear enough for the microphone above the door to catch. "Why are you so desperate to keep me outside?" Brielle blinked. The question threw her. She had expected begging. She had expected anger. She had not expected analysis. Because, she started, then stopped. She frowned. Because you are embarrassing. No, I said. That is not it. You are afraid. Afraid of what she scoffed. Of your old car. Of your cheap shoes. The sound of the hydraulic mechanism engaging interrupted her. It was a soft, pneumatic hiss, followed by the heavy slide of glass. The doors did not open because the sensor was triggered. They opened because they were overridden from the inside. The conversation in the entryway died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, measured. Heavy footsteps echoed on the Italian marble of the lobby floor. Click, click, click. A figure emerged from the warm glow of the interior. Jamal Price was 6 feet and 4 inches of former military discipline, wrapped in a bespoke Navy suit that cost $5,000. I knew the price because I had approved the budget for the senior executive uniforms personally. He walked with the terrifying calm of a man who could dismantle a threat in 3 seconds, but preferred to use silence instead. He moved past the concierge desk. He walked past the bellman. He walked straight toward the open doors. Brielle straightened her spine. She adjusted her clutch. She put on her most charming, flirtatious smile, the one she used on police officers to get out of speeding tickets. She assumed he was coming to help her. She assumed he was the muscle she had threatened to call. "Officer," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I am so glad you are here. We have a slight issue with a loiterer who refuses to leave the premises." She gestured vaguely at me without looking at me. Jamal did not break stride. He did not look at Brielle. He did not look at Elaine, who had taken a step back, sensing a shift in the energy that she could not quite name. Jamal walked right through the open doors and into the cold night air. He stopped exactly 2 feet in front of me. He blocked Brielle from my view entirely. His broad shoulders created a wall between me and my family. He stood at attention, his hands clasped loosely in front of him, his demeanor respectful, deferential, and absolutely professional. He ignored the woman in the red dress. He ignored the mother in the shadows. He looked only at me. "Good evening, Ms. Kelly," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, clear and projected. It was not the voice of a bouncer speaking to a guest. It was the voice of a lieutenant reporting to a general. "Your private level is ready," he continued. "We have prepared the north elevator for your exclusive use, as per your standing protocol." The silence that descended on the entryway was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens when the laws of physics suddenly reverse. I saw Brielle's reflection in the glass door. Her mouth was slightly open. Her hand was frozen halfway to her hair. I saw my mother freeze. Her eyes went wide. She looked from Jamal to me, and for the first time in 10 years, I saw true confusion crack the porcelain mask of her face. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just nodded at Jamal. "Thank you." "Jamal," I said. That was the moment the dinner actually began. Not with an appetizer, but with a realization. They thought they were the gatekeepers. They had no idea they were just standing in my doorway. The screen of my phone lit up at 14 minutes past 8 in the morning. It vibrated against the cool granite of my kitchen island, a harsh, buzzing intrusion into the silence I had carefully cultivated. I was drinking black coffee and reviewing the overnight occupancy reports for the hotel, my mind filled with percentages and revenue per available room. Then I saw the name on the screen. Mother. I did not pick it up immediately. In my family, communication was rarely about connection. It was usually about correction. I let it sit there for a moment, the white letters glowing against the dark background, before I finally reached out and tapped the glass. It was not a greeting. It was not a birthday reminder. It was a directive. "Do not come tonight. It is at Varelli. You cannot afford it. Do not embarrass your father." I stared at the words. I read them once, then twice, then a third time. After a few seconds, they stopped looking like English sentences and started to feel like a verdict handed down by a judge in a courtroom I had never been invited to enter. "You cannot afford it." The sentence was so absolute, so factual in her mind. It was not a question of my bank account. It was a judgment of my worth. To Elaine Kelly, affordability was not just about money, it was about social currency, it was about belonging, and in her ledger, I was bankrupt. I felt the familiar urge to type a response. My thumbs hovered over the keypad. I wanted to tell her that I had paid off my student loans 5 years ago. I wanted to tell her that my credit score was perfect. I wanted to scream that I did not need her permission to eat dinner in a city where I paid property taxes, but I lowered the phone and let the screen go black. I did not respond because I learned the rules of this game when I was 16 years old, in the Kelly family. Silence is compliance, but defense is aggression. If I replied, I would be labeled dramatic. If I argued, I would be called sensitive. If I pointed out the cruelty of uninviting a daughter to her own father's birthday, I would be accused of making everything about me. The only winning move was to not play. I placed the phone face down on the counter. I took a sip of my coffee, which had gone cold, and walked to the window of my apartment. I lived on the 35th floor of a building 3 streets away from the Virelli house. I could see the top of my own tower from here, the sleek dark glass reflecting the morning sun. They thought I was waking up in a cramped studio apartment, counting pennies to buy a dress for tonight. They imagined me panicking, looking at the menu online, realizing I could not pay for the steak. They needed that version of me to exist. It made them feel superior. It made their own precarious financial house of cards feel stable by comparison. I turned away from the window and went to get dressed. I did not put on a suit. I put on my uniform. My uniform was not a polyester vest and a name tag. It was a charcoal cashmere sweater, tailored trousers, and boots that made no sound when I walked. It was the uniform of an operator who does not need to be seen to be heard. By 9 o'clock, I was walking through the service corridors of the Virelli house. This was my real morning. While Elaine was likely at a salon getting her hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection, and Brielle was practicing her poses, I was checking the pulse of the building. I walked the back hallways where the guests never went. The air here smelled of industrial citrus cleaner and fresh linen. The hum of the HVAC system was a steady, comforting thrum in the walls. This was the machine that powered the fantasy. I stopped at the service elevator on the 12th floor. There was a scuff mark on the baseboard, a black streak of rubber from a luggage cart. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo, and uploaded it to the maintenance ticket system. It would be painted over within 2 hours. Details matter. God is in the details. But so is the devil. And in the hospitality business, the devil is a 1-star review. I stepped out onto the mezzanine level. The lobby below was quiet, the morning light streaming in through the double-height windows. I stood by the railing, invisible to the staff working the floor below, and inhaled. I was checking the scent. The Virelli house had a signature scent pumped through the ventilation system. It was a custom blend of white tea, cedar, and a hint of bergamot. It was designed to trigger a psychological response of calm and expensive safety. It cost me $12,000 a month to maintain the diffusion system, but it was worth every penny. It smelled crisp today. Perfect. I continued my rounds, moving with the efficiency of a woman who knows every bolt and wire in the structure. I walked past the ballroom where a corporate event was setting up. I checked the lighting levels in the hallway leading to the VIP suites. One of the sconces was flickering a tiny, imperceptible strobe effect that most people would ignore. I made a note. It would be replaced before lunch. As I worked, the text message from my mother sat in the back of my mind like a cold stone. Don't embarrass your father. 10 years ago, I had sat across from my father in his study. The room had smelled of leather and stale cigar smoke. I was 25, fresh out of business school, holding a business plan for a boutique logistics firm. I had spent 6 months writing it. I had done the market research. I had lined up a potential angel investor. I showed it to him because I wanted him to be proud. I wanted him to see that I had his drive. He had laughed. It was not a mean laugh, which made it worse. It was a dismissive, pitying chuckle. He poured himself a drink and pushed the papers back across the desk without reading the second page. "Natalie," he had said, looking at me with watery eyes, "you are chasing a ghost. You do not have the killer instinct for this. You are soft. You are meant to be support staff, not the CEO. You will never be more than service. Why do you not find a nice husband like your sister is trying to do? Stop embarrassing yourself with these little projects. I left the house that night. I did not take his money. I did not take his advice. 2 years later, I founded Northvale Ledger Strategy. It sounded boring. It sounded like a mid-level accounting firm that handled tax returns for dentists. That was the point. I needed a shield. I needed a name that my family would never look at twice. Through Northvale, I began buying distressed properties. I bought a failing motel in Georgia. I renovated it, streamlined the operations, and sold it for 3 times the price. I bought a warehouse in Chicago and converted it into luxury lofts. I worked 18 hours a day. I slept on mattresses in construction zones. I learned how to plumb a toilet and how to negotiate a union contract. I missed Christmas 3 years in a row. My mother told the extended family I was finding myself and struggling. She sent me gift cards for grocery stores, performing charity for the black sheep. I used the gift cards to buy coffee for my construction crews. When I finally broke ground on the Varelli house, I did it under the Northvale banner. My name appears on the deed, but it is buried under layers of corporate structuring that require a forensic accountant to unravel. I am the owner on paper, in the contracts, in the signatures on the bank loans that I have quietly paid down to zero, but to the world, and to my family. I was still Natalie the drifter, Natalie the disappointment. I walked into the kitchen on the main level. The heat hit me instantly, carrying the smell of roasting garlic and reduction sauces. Chef Simone Reyes looked up from the pass. She was a terrifying woman to her sous chefs, but she smiled when she saw me. "Ms. Kelly," she said, "the Wagyu shipment arrived. The marbling is exceptional." I nodded. "Good. The private dinner in the Obsidian Room tonight. The birthday." Simone paused. She knew the name on the reservation. She knew my last name. She was one of the few who knew the connection, though we never spoke of it explicitly. "The Sutherland party," she asked. "Yes," I said. "Ensure the service is flawless." "Simone, no mistakes." She looked at me carefully. "Standard VIP protocol, higher." I said. She nodded slowly, understanding that this was a test, even if she did not understand the parameters. I walked out of the kitchen and took the staff elevator up to the penthouse level, my level. I stood in the center of my living room, looking out over the city. The irony was burning a hole in my chest. My family worshipped status. They prayed at the altar of exclusivity. They measured a person's worth by the thread count of their sheets and the zip code of their dinner reservations. And tonight, they were coming to worship at my temple. They were going to walk on the marble floors I picked out in Italy. They were going to eat food prepared by the chef I hired. They were going to drink wine from the cellar I curated, and they were going to do it while telling me I was too poor to be in the room. My mother's text message flashed in my mind again. "You cannot afford it." She was right, in a way. I could not afford the emotional cost of being their daughter anymore. I could not afford to sit there and shrink myself to fit into the tiny box they had built for me. I could not afford to smile while they made jokes about my little job and my sad life. But I was not going tonight as their daughter. I walked into my dressing room. I ran my hand over the clothes hanging there. I pushed past the soft knits and the comfortable jeans. I stopped at a garment bag in the back. I unzipped it. Inside was a black dress. It was structured, architectural, and severe. It was not a dress for a party. It was a dress for a board meeting. It was armor. I realized then that I had a choice. I could stay home. I could order takeout and watch a movie, and let them have their night. I could let them tell the story of poor Natalie who was too ashamed to show her face. It would be easier. It would be safer. But then I remembered the way my father had looked at me in that study. I remembered the way Brielle had laughed when I told her I was starting a business. I remembered the charity gift cards. They wanted to play a game of status. They wanted to measure power. Fine. I would not show up as the daughter who wanted approval. That Natalie died the moment she read the text message this morning. I was showing up as the owner who refused to be erased from her own building. I checked my watch. It was 4 in the afternoon. I had 3 hours to prepare. I needed to brief Jamal. I needed to review the security logs. I needed to make sure that when I walked through those doors, there would be no question about who held the keys. I picked up my phone and deleted my mother's message. I did not need to save it. I had memorized it. It was the fuel that would power me through the rest of the night. I walked over to the intercom on my wall and pressed the button for the security office. Security. Jamal answering. The voice came through instantly. Jamal, I said, this is Natalie. I will be attending the Sutherland dinner tonight. There was a brief pause on the line. Jamal was a professional. He did not ask questions, but he understood the implications. Understood. Ms. Kelly, he said, shall I alert the front desk? No. I said, let the front desk follow standard procedure, but I want you at the door at 700 hours. Personally, yes, ma'am. And Jamal, yes, Miss Kelly. Ensure the cameras in the lobby are recording at full resolution. I have a feeling we might need the footage. I released the button. The verdict had been delivered this morning. You cannot afford this. Tonight, I was going to file the appeal, and I was going to win. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the light in my office began to shift from the harsh brightness of midday to the golden, bruising hues of early evening. I was standing at the wall of monitors that displayed the vitals of the Varelli house when the door opened. Rosa Ibarra did not knock. As my director of operations, she knew that knocking was a waste of seconds we rarely had. She walked in carrying a tablet and a physical dossier bound in the thick, cream-colored cardstock we used for high-level VIP coordination. Her face, usually a mask of unflappable efficiency, held a tightness around the eyes that I recognized immediately. It was the look she wore when a pipe burst on a holiday weekend or when a guest threatened a lawsuit. You need to see this, she said. She placed the file on my desk with a heavy thud. I turned away from the screens. What is it? The briefing packet for the Kelly birthday dinner, she said. The event team just finalized the special instructions. There are anomalies. I walked over and opened the folder. The paper was smooth under my fingertips. At the top was the standard event sheet Graham Kelly. 65th birthday celebration. 40 guests. Obsidian room. $800 per head fixed menu. That was standard. My father liked to spend money, even when he did not have it, to prove he could, but Rosa had not come here to show me a menu. She reached over and flipped the page to the guest list. I scanned the names. I expected to see my aunts, uncles, maybe a few neighbors from the old cul-de-sac. Instead, I saw a roster that read like a prospectus for a hostile takeover. Harlan Cade, Senior Executive Vice President at Sovereign Regional Bank. Trent Sutter, Managing Partner at Sutter. Davis Klein, the Marrow family, real estate moguls who owned half of the downtown historical district. I felt a cold prickle of recognition on the back of my neck. These were not friends. My father did not play golf with Harlan Cade. My mother did not brunch with the Marrows. These were targets. These were the whales my mother, Elaine, had been trying to harpoon for social leverage for 20 years. Why are they here, I asked, mostly to myself. Keep reading, Rosa said. Look at the operational notes. I looked at the section highlighted in yellow. It was under security protocols. Client requests strict perimeter control at main entrance. No unlisted guests to be admitted under any circumstances. Specific instruction. If Natalie Kelly attempts access, deny entry and cite capacity issues. Defer to family point of contact Betrayal Kelly for all door decisions. I stared at the words. Specific instruction. They had not just uninvited me via text message, they had codified my exclusion into the security policy of the building. They had made erasing me a contractual obligation. Why, I asked. Why go to this length? A text message is usually enough to keep the black sheep away. This feels strategic. Rosa tapped the screen of her tablet. That is what I thought. So I ran a cross-reference on the family point of contact, Betrayal, and I found something pending in the leasing department. She slid the tablet across the desk. On the screen was a commercial lease application filed 3 days ago. The applicant was BK Consulting Group. The principal was Betrayal Kelly. I looked at the details. She was applying for 3,000 square feet of office space on the 20th floor. The financials attached to the application were a disaster. The revenue projections were based on fantasy. The cash on hand was non-existent, and the list of current clients was blank. "She is trying to lease space here," I asked, the absurdity rising in my throat. "She can barely afford her car payment." "She is not just trying to lease space," Rosa said. "Look at the reference letter." I scrolled down. There was a letter of intent attached to the application. It stated that funding is secured pending finalization of partnership agreement with Sovereign Regional Bank. Sovereign Regional Bank. Harlan Cade's bank. My eyes snapped back to the guest list. Harlan Cade was coming to dinner tonight. Brielle was trying to close a deal. She was trying to secure funding for a shell company by leveraging a dinner party that was supposed to be for our father. "And there is more," Rosa said. She was enjoying this now. In the grim way a surgeon enjoys finding the source of the bleeding. "I looked into Derek Shaw, your brother-in-law." I nodded. Derek worked in mid-level compliance at a different bank. First City Trust. "He is not in compliance anymore," Rosa said. "He was moved to the commercial lending division 2 months ago. His performance review is next week, and First City Trust is the bank that our board is quietly evaluating for acquisition." I froze. My company, Northvale, was in the early stages of due diligence to acquire First City Trust. It was a secret deal, known only to the top 3 executives. "If Derek Shaw brings in a big client like the Marrow family," Rosa said, connecting the dots, "his portfolio looks a lot better before the acquisition. He saves his job. Maybe he even gets a promotion before the axe falls." I looked back at the dossier. The pieces clicked into place with the precision of a locking mechanism. This was not a birthday party. My father turned 65 today. But that was just the excuse. This event was a marketplace. Elaine had curated this room not to celebrate her husband, but to sell her family. She was selling the image of the Kelly dynasty. She was selling Brielle as a high-powered consultant who could afford office space in the city's most exclusive tower. She was selling Derek as a connected banker who rubbed shoulders with the Marrows. She was selling the lie that they were powerful, wealthy, and influential. And that was why I could not be there. I did not fit the product description. In their narrative, the Kelly family was a monolith of success. If I walked in Natalie, the one with the old car, the one they thought struggled to pay rent, the one who wore practical clothes and did not wear diamonds, I would shatter the illusion. I was the evidence that the dynasty was a sham. I was the broke daughter who could not keep up. My presence would raise questions. Why is the sister struggling if the family is so rich? Why is she not part of the consulting firm? They needed me gone so they could lie without a witness. I closed the dossier. The anger that had been simmering since the morning text message cooled into something hard and sharp. It was no longer about hurt feelings. It was about business. They were using my building, my staff, and my resources to run a con game on people I did business with. Brielle's application is denied. I said. Rosa nodded. Obviously. But do you want me to flag it now? No, I said. Let it sit in the system. I want her to think it is still possible. I stood up and walked to the window. Down below, the city was turning on its lights. The traffic was a river of white and red. Elaine wants tighter control at the front doors, I said quietly. She wants us to defer to Brielle. Rosa waited. She knew better than to interrupt. Tell Jamal that no family member controls my doors. I said, not tonight, not ever. The policy is absolute. If they want to screen guests, they can do it at their own house, in the Varelli house. We follow the guest list, and we follow the law. Document every request they make. If Brielle tries to direct security, I want it logged. If Elaine tries to move seating charts, I want it logged. What about you? Rosa asked. The private elevator is prepped. You can slip into the observation deck without them ever seeing you. You can watch the whole dinner on the monitors. I thought about it. It would be the easy way. I could watch them spin their webs and lie to Harlan Cade. I could watch my father blow out his candles, oblivious to the fact that he was being used as bait. But hiding was what the old Natalie would have done. Hiding was admitting that I was something to be ashamed of. No, I said. I turned back to Rosa. Cancel the private elevator. Rosa's eyebrows shot up. You are not coming. I am coming. I said, but I'm not sneaking in through the back. I am not going to be the secret owner tonight. I picked up the dossier and dropped it into the shredder by my desk. The machine roared to life, eating the evidence of their little scheme. I am going to walk through the front door. I said, I am going to walk right past Brielle and Elaine. I am going to let them see me. I am going to let them panic. And I am going to let the truth stand in the lobby for everyone to see. Rosa smiled. It was a shark's smile. I will tell Jamal to be ready, she said. I looked at the clock. It was 5:15. I had less than 2 hours to transform from the invisible operator into the woman who owned the skyline. I walked to my private bathroom and turned on the shower. As the water hit the tile, I made a silent promise to the little girl who had been told she would never be more than service. Tonight, service was going to teach them a lesson in ownership. The shredder in the corner of my office finished its work, reducing the evidence of my family's schemes to a pile of confetti. The silence that followed should have been the signal for Rosa to leave, to go back to managing the logistics of a hotel that never slept, but she did not move. She stood by the door, her hand resting on the brass handle, her body language screaming conflict. Rosa Ibarra was not a woman who hesitated. In the 3 years she had run operations for me, I had seen her stare down fire marshals and negotiate with union reps without blinking. To see her pause now sent a cold spike of adrenaline through my veins. What is it? I asked. I did not look up from my monitor, where I was pretending to check the humidity levels in the wine cellar. There is one more thing in the file, she said. Her voice was tight. I did not include it in the printed dossier because I wanted to verify it with security first. I thought it might be a mistake. I finally looked at her. Rosa does not make mistakes. What kind of thing? She walked back to my desk and tapped a sequence into her tablet. She turned the screen toward me. It is an internal restriction note, she said. It was logged in the guest management system at 9:30 this morning. I looked at the entry. It was flagged in red, the color code for high-risk individuals. The text was short, brutal, and devoid of emotion. Subject Natalie Kelly. Status restricted. Instruction: do not admit to private dining levels. Individual is known to cause disruption. If cited, intercept and remove. Authorization: client request. E. Kelly. I stared at the words until they blurred. This was not a text message telling me to stay away because I was an embarrassment. This was a formal security directive. My mother had not just uninvited me. She had criminalized my presence. She had placed my name on a list usually reserved for stalkers, paparazzi, and violent drunks. She had told the staff of my own building that I was a threat. I felt something settle inside me. It was a heavy, cold weight, like a stone dropping into a deep well. Until this moment, I had allowed myself to believe that their behavior was driven by simple snobbery. I thought they were just ashamed of the daughter who drove a sedan and wore off-the-rack clothes. But this note was different. This was not shame. This was tactical. You do not put a restriction note on a family member just to avoid an awkward conversation. You do it to ensure they cannot witness something. It is not a mistake, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. Rosa took the tablet back. I spoke to the intake manager. She said your mother was very specific. She used the words unstable and emotional. She told the staff that you might try to crash the event to ask for money. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Ask for money. That was the narrative they had built. The failing daughter coming to beg from the successful family. It was a perfect cover story. If I showed up and caused a scene, everyone would assume I was desperate. And if security removed me, it would just prove her point. I looked at the time. It was 5:40 in the afternoon. Get me the logs, I said. Rosa blinked. Which logs? All of them. I said, I want the timestamp of when that request was made. I want the name of the employee who took it. I want the exact language used. And I want the footage of the conversation if it happened in the lobby. I stood up and walked to the wall of monitors. I needed to see the building. I needed to see the machine that I built. The machine they were trying to turn against me. My family loves stories, I said, looking at the feed from the main entrance. They love to tell people what happened. They love to edit the past until it fits their version of reality. Natalie was hysterical. Natalie made a scene. We had no choice. I turned back to Rosa. Stories die under documentation. I said, I want every second of this night recorded. If they say a word, I want a timestamp attached to it. Rosa nodded. She understood. This was not a family dispute anymore. It was a forensic investigation. She tapped her earpiece. Jamal, come in. Go ahead. Director. Jamal's voice crackled through the speaker on her desk. Ms. Kelly is asking for confirmation on the foyer incident earlier today, Rosa said. Regarding the door protocols. There was a pause. I could hear the background noise of the lobby through the connection, the murmur of guests, the chime of the elevators. Affirmative, Jamal said. At 1600 hours, Brielle Kelly approached the security podium. She requested a physical list of all incoming guests for the Sutherland party. She stated her intention to stand by the velvet rope to identify approved attendees personally. And I asked, leaning toward the speaker, I refused. Per policy. Jamal said. His voice was flat, bored even. I informed her that guest identification is the sole responsibility of Varelli House security personnel. She became agitated. She insisted that she was the primary point of contact and that she needed to filter the arrivals. She used the phrase filter out the trash. I closed my eyes. Filter out the trash. She meant me, but she also meant anyone else who might disrupt the image they were selling. Thank you. Jamal, I said, hold your position. I cut the line. They were terrified. You do not try to man the door unless you are afraid of what might walk through it. You do not file restriction notes unless you are trying to hide a body. What are they protecting? Rosa, I asked. She looked at the shredded files in the bin. The deal, she said. The bank acquisition? The lease? If Harlan Cade sees you, if he realizes the sister is not a failure, but the owner of the building he is standing in, he starts asking questions. He asks why Brielle needs a loan if her sister owns the skyline. He asks why Derek is desperate for a credit facility if the family has this kind of asset. Exactly. I said, the lie falls apart if I'm in the room. I walked to the door. I have to go to the kitchen. You have 30 minutes before guests arrive. Rosa warned. That is plenty of time. I took the service elevator down to the culinary level. The kitchen was a symphony of controlled chaos. 30 chefs moved in a choreographed dance of white coats and flashing steel. The air was thick with the smell of truffles and searing meat. Chef Simone Reyes was at the pass, inspecting a tray of hors d'oeuvres with the intensity of a diamond cutter. She saw me and wiped her hands on a towel. Ms. Kelly, she said, we are on schedule. The amuse-bouche is plated. I looked at the menu taped to the wall. It was decadent. Lobster thermidor, Wagyu beef, vintage champagne. It was a menu designed to overpower the senses, to make the guests feel drunk on luxury so they would not read the fine print of whatever deal my brother-in-law was pushing. Change the pacing, I said. Simone frowned. Slow it down. Yes, I said. I want 20 minutes between the appetizer and the salad. I want 30 minutes before the main course. That is a long gap, she said. The guests will get restless. Good, I said. Let them get restless. Let the conversation lull. When people are eating, they are happy. When they are waiting, they start looking around. They start noticing things. They start talking about things they shouldn't. I wanted the dinner to be an interrogation, not a celebration. I wanted Harlan Cade to have time to ask Derek about his numbers. I wanted the Marrows to ask Brielle about her consulting firm while they waited for their steak. Food can calm egos, I said, or it can sharpen them. Tonight, we sharpen them. Simone nodded. She grabbed a marker and slashed through the timestamps on the prep sheet, writing new numbers in bold black ink, 20-minute delays. She confirmed. I left the kitchen and headed back up to my office. I had one last thing to do. I went to the safe behind my desk. I keyed in the code, and the heavy steel door swung open. Inside, sitting on a velvet shelf, was a single white envelope. It was not thick. It contained 3 sheets of paper. I took it out and weighed it in my hand. Brielle would have a gift for Dad. It would be something flashy, a watch she bought on credit, a set of golf clubs she could not afford. It would be wrapped in gold paper with a massive ribbon, designed to look impressive in the photos. My gift was plain. It was a standard legal envelope. I had not wrapped it. I had not put a bow on it. Real power does not need ribbon. Real power is a signature on a bottom line that changes a life. Inside that envelope was the deed release for my parents' house. They didn't know I had bought their mortgage note 2 years ago through a shell company. They thought the bank had just stopped calling. Tonight, I was going to give it to him. I was going to hand him his freedom at the same table where he was planning to sign it away again to save Brielle's failing business. I checked my appearance in the mirror one last time. The black dress was severe. My hair was pulled back tight. I wore no jewelry except for a small watch. I looked like what I was the operator. I am going down. I messaged Rosa. To the restaurant, she replied. To the lobby. I typed back. Why? Because I want to see them. I thought, I wanted to see them before the mask slipped. I wanted to see Brielle standing at the door, thinking she was the queen of the castle. I wanted to see Elaine guiding guests toward the elevator, thinking she had successfully scrubbed me from the picture. I wanted to witness who they became when they thought they were in total control. I slipped the envelope into my clutch. I walked out of my office and toward the main elevator bank. I did not take the private car. I took the guest elevator. I pressed the button for the lobby. As the numbers on the display counted down 40, 30, 20, I felt a strange sense of calm. The hurt was gone. The desire for approval was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard clarity of the policy. They had requested a restriction. They had asked for rules. I was about to give them exactly what they asked for. I walked out of the side exit of the tower, circled the block, and approached the main driveway from the street. I needed this moment to be clean. I needed to enter the valet line not as a woman sneaking around the back of her own property, but as a guest arriving at the front door. The air outside had turned biting cold. The wind was whipping down the canyon created by the skyscrapers, but under the heated portico of the Varelli house, the atmosphere was controlled and temperate. A line of black sedans and luxury SUVs idled in the driveway. The valet team was moving with the precise, frantic energy of a pit crew. I stepped into the line of arrivals. Ahead of me, I saw a Bentley pull away, revealing the entrance. Brielle was still there. She had not moved from her post. She was shivering slightly in her red dress, her arms crossed over her chest, but her determination to play the role of the gatekeeper was keeping her warm. She spotted me instantly. For a second, her expression was prior annoyance, the look of a child who thought they had already thrown out a broken toy only to find it back on the shelf. Then, the mask slammed into place. She adjusted her posture, plastered a bright, brittle smile onto her face, and slid sideways to physically block the path to the revolving doors. She did not look like a sister. She looked like a barrier. I walked up to her. I stopped exactly 3 feet away. This was the social distance required for polite conversation. But in this context, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. You are persistent. Natalie, she said. Her voice was light, designed to sound like banter to anyone passing by. But her eyes were hard. I thought Mom made it clear. The guest list is locked. I looked at the guests filing in behind me. I recognized Harlan Cade getting out of a town car. He was adjusting his cufflinks, looking up at the architecture of the building with an appraising eye. He was 20 feet away. I am here for dinner. Brielle, I said. My voice was calm. It carried just enough for her to hear, but not enough to cause a scene. Yet, Elaine appeared at Brielle's elbow. She must have been watching from the lobby glass, tracking the arrivals like a hawk. She stepped close to me, bringing that cloud of expensive floral perfume with her. She smiled for the benefit of the valet, but her hand gripped my wrist. Please, she whispered. Her lips barely moved. People are watching. Natalie, do not do this. She glanced over my shoulder at Harlan Cade. Her eyes were wide with a specific kind of panic. It was not fear for my safety. It was not fear that I would be hurt. It was the terrifying realization that she was losing control of the narrative. If Cade saw me, the rejected daughter, arguing on the sidewalk, the image of the perfect, united Kelly family would crack. I pulled my wrist free. I am not doing anything. Mother, I said, I am standing in line. You are the one blocking the door. Derek Shaw, my brother-in-law, stepped out from the warmth of the lobby. He looked flushed, likely from the heat inside or the stress of the impending bank deal. He saw the standoff and rushed over, buttoning his suit jacket as if that would somehow formalize the rejection. "Natalie," he said, putting on his best reasonable middle manager voice, "come on, be realistic." He stepped between me and the door, reinforcing the wall. "This isn't the place for your issues," he said. He used the word issues like it was a synonym for poverty. "We have serious people inside. The Marrows are here. Cade is here. We can't have you looking like this in the middle of the lobby." I looked down at my clothes. The black architectural dress, the boots, the coat. I looked perfectly appropriate. But to Derek, I didn't look like money. I looked like a risk. "Handle this privately, Natalie," Derek said, lowering his voice. "Go home. We'll send you a plate of food later. Or a gift card. Just don't ruin this for Brielle. She has worked so hard on this event." The condescension was breathtaking. He was speaking to me as if my dignity was an inconvenience, a minor logistical hurdle to be cleared so the real business could begin. He offered me leftovers from a table I owned. Elaine leaned in again. Her voice was soft, trembling with a mixture of pity and rage. "You cannot keep up with this world, Natalie," she said. The words hung in the cold air. "You cannot keep up with this world." She truly believed it. She believed that this building, this level of service, this stratosphere of wealth was a foreign country to me. She thought I was a tourist who had lost her passport. She didn't realize she was standing on the sovereign soil of my own imagination. I looked at the three of them. Brielle, the desperate climber, Derek, the anxious gambler, Elaine, the architect of the lie. They were waiting for me to cry. They were waiting for me to yell. They wanted the reaction because the reaction would validate them. If I screamed, I was the crazy daughter. If I cried, I was the weak daughter. I did neither. I looked at Brielle. "If I am trespassing," I said, my voice completely flat, "then you should follow protocol." Brielle blinked. "What if I am not on the list, and I am refusing to leave?" "That is a security breach," I explained. I spoke the words slowly, like I was teaching a new hire. "The procedure for a security breach is to call the head of security." I gestured to the phone in her hand. "Call him," I said. Derek laughed nervously. "Natalie, don't be dramatic. We don't want to have you dragged away. I am inviting you to do it." I said, "Follow the policy, call security, have me removed." Elaine looked at me with suspicion. She sensed the trap, even if she couldn't see the teeth. "Brielle, don't," Elaine warned, but Brielle was too far gone. She saw an opportunity to finally, publicly exert power over me. She saw a chance to prove to herself that she belonged on the inside, and I belonged on the curb. She pulled out her phone. "Fine," she said. "You want to be humiliated? Fine." She tapped the screen. She didn't even have to look up the number. She had probably saved it earlier when she was trying to commandeer the staff. She put the phone to her ear, staring at me with a triumphant smirk. Security. "This is Brielle Kelly," she said into the phone. "Yes, I am at the front entrance. I have an unauthorized individual refusing to vacate the premises. It is Natalie Kelly. Yes, the one from the restriction note. Please come immediately." She hung up. She crossed her arms. "He is coming," she said. "I hope you are happy." The valet stopped moving. The guests in line behind me stopped talking. Harlan Cade, who had been about to enter the revolving door, paused and turned around. The commotion had finally caught his attention. He looked at me, then at Derek, then at Brielle. He didn't look annoyed. He looked curious. We stood there in the silence of the driveway. 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Elaine was pale. She was looking at Cade, silently pleading with him to ignore the spectacle. Derek was wiping sweat from his upper lip. Then, the revolving doors spun. They didn't spin for a guest. They spun with a heavy, deliberate momentum. Jamal Price stepped out. He was not alone this time. He was flanked by 2 other security officers, both dressed in the sharp, tactical suits that defined the Varelli House aesthetic. They moved with a synchronization that was almost military. Jamal stopped 10 feet away. He looked at the group of us. His face was unreadable. He did not look angry. He looked precise. Brielle stepped forward. She pointed at me. "There she is," Brielle said, her voice rising in pitch. "She is blocking the entrance. She is harassing the guests. I want her removed. I want her banned from the property." She looked at Jamal, expecting him to move, expecting him to grab my arm, expecting the violence of authority to descend on her behalf. Jamal did not move toward me. He did not look at Brielle. He took out a tablet. He tapped the screen once. "Ms. Kelly stated that she is harassing guests," Jamal asked. "Yes," Brielle shouted. "She is making a scene." Jamal looked at the camera mounted above the valet stand. He looked back at Brielle. The video feed shows Ms. Kelly standing in line. Jamal said calmly, "It shows you blocking her path. It shows you initiating the confrontation." Brielle faltered. "What?" "It doesn't matter. She is on the restriction list. My mother put her on the list." She pointed at Elaine. Elaine shrank back, trying to make herself invisible. Jamal looked at his tablet again. "I see the restriction note," he said. "It was flagged for review at 1600 hours." He looked up. "However," Jamal continued, his voice projecting so that Harlan Cade and every valet could hear, "protocol dictates that a restriction note cannot be enforced against the deed holder of the property." The air left the driveway. It wasn't a gasp. It was a sudden, vacuum-like silence. Brielle's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Derek froze. Jamal turned his body. He turned away from Brielle. He turned away from the guests. He faced me. He adjusted his cuffs. He bowed his head slightly, not a bow of servitude, but a bow of recognition. "Good evening, Ms. Kelly," he said. He stepped to the side, clearing the path to the doors. The two officers behind him stepped aside as well, creating a wide, unobstructed corridor through the chaos. "Your level is ready," Jamal said. "We have cleared the elevators for your arrival." I didn't move immediately. I let the words land. I let them sink into Brielle's consciousness. Deed holder. I saw the realization hit Derek first. His eyes went wide, darting from me to the building, doing the math that he should have done weeks ago. I saw Elaine put a hand to her chest, her breath catching in a sob of pure shock, and Brielle. Brielle just looked at the empty space where she thought her power existed. She looked at the doors she had been guarding. They were no longer a wall. They were no longer a weapon she could use to keep me out. They were an entrance. My entrance. I stepped forward. I walked past Brielle. I did not look at her. I did not have to. She was part of the architecture now. Just another obstacle I had renovated around. I walked past Derek, who stumbled back as if my shadow had physical weight. I walked past Elaine, who was staring at me like I was a stranger she had never met. I walked up to Jamal. "Thank you." "Jamal," I said, "please ensure the flow of traffic resumes. We don't want the guests to wait in the cold." "Understood." "Ms. Kelly." I stepped into the revolving door. As the glass spun, pushing me from the cold, biting wind into the warm, scented air of the lobby, I saw Harlan Cade on the other side. He was standing there, watching me emerge. He wasn't looking at me like a poor relation anymore. He was looking at me with the sharp, predatory respect of one shark recognizing another. "Ms. Kelly," he said, nodding. "Mr. Cade," I replied, not breaking my stride. "Welcome to my house." The transition from the biting wind of the driveway to the hermetically sealed atmosphere of the lobby was instant. The revolving doors swept us inside, depositing my family onto the Italian marble floor like driftwood washing up on a pristine beach. The silence in the lobby of the Varelli house was not empty. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that cost money to engineer. It was composed of acoustic paneling hidden behind silk wallpaper, thick wool rugs, and the soft, ambient hum of a fountain that masked conversations. My mother, Elaine, was the first to recover. She had spent 40 years pretending that uncomfortable realities did not exist, and she was not about to stop now just because the head of security had called me the owner. She sidled up to me as we walked toward the security checkpoint, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the stone. "We did not know," she whispered. Her voice was breathy, attempting to sound shocked. "Natalie, honestly, you never told us. How were we supposed to know you were involved here? We thought you were just working here." She was trying to stitch reality back together before the glue had even dried. She was trying to frame their cruelty as a simple misunderstanding, a lack of information rather than a surplus of malice. I did not look at her. I kept my eyes on the elevator bank at the far end of the hall. "You did not know I owned the building," I said, keeping my voice low. "But you knew I was your daughter, and you still tried to have me removed by force." Elaine faltered. She pulled at the collar of her coat. "We were just trying to protect the evening. For your father. You know how stressed he gets." Behind us, Brielle was walking, or rather, she was marching. Her heels, which she had probably bought to look authoritative, were striking the marble floor with a violence that echoed off the high ceilings. Clack, 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 in a space designed for hushed tones and soft footsteps. The sound was abrasive. It sounded cheap. It sounded like panic. Every staff member in the lobby, the concierge, the bellmen, the front desk agents was standing perfectly still. They were not looking at their screens. They were looking at me. They were witnessing the shift in power, and they knew exactly which side of the line to stand on. As we passed the central seating area, a man stood up from one of the velvet armchairs. It was Harlan Cade. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. He held a crystal tumbler of sparkling water in one hand. Tss. He did not look at the art on the walls. He did not look at the elaborate floral arrangement. He looked directly at me. "Natalie," he said. His voice was warm. It was the voice of a man greeting an equal, a peer, a partner. He stepped into our path, ignoring the three people flanking me as if they were luggage I had hired someone to carry. "Mr. Cade," I said, pausing. "It is good to see you." He extended a hand. I took it. His grip was firm, dry, and respectful. "I was hoping to catch you before the dinner," he said. "I saw the quarterly report for the Uptown District. The occupancy rates you are pulling here are defying the market trends. I wanted to ask about your strategy for the third quarter." He was talking business. He was talking publicly. He was establishing, in front of everyone, that I was the axis around which this room revolved. My brother-in-law, Derek, saw an opening. He stepped forward, thrusting his hand out with a desperation that was painful to watch. "Harlan," he exclaimed, using a first name he had definitely not earned. "Good to see you. I'm glad you could make it for Graham's birthday. We are really looking forward to." Cade did not take the hand. He did not even look down at it. He simply shifted his gaze from me to Derek, his expression cooling by 10 degrees. "Mr. Shaw," Cade said. The silence that followed was excruciating. Derek's hand hovered in the air for 2 seconds, an eternity in social time, before he awkwardly retracted it, pretending he had just been adjusting his cuff. "I saw you are on the guest list," Cade continued, his tone turning clinical. "It is interesting timing. I was just speaking with the risk assessment team regarding First City Trust." Derek froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. First City Trust was his bank. It was the bank my team was quietly evaluating for acquisition, though he did not know that part. He only knew that things were unstable. "Risk assessment," Derek stammered. "Yes," Cade said pleasantly. "The bank is under review. Heavy review. I imagine you have had a stressful week." It was a evisceration disguised as small talk. Cade was letting him know that his professional standing was crumbling. He was letting him know that he was not a peer. He was a liability. Derek looked like he might vomit. He glanced at Brielle, but she wasn't looking at him. She was staring at Harlan Cade. Watching the way he focused entirely on me, I realized she was seeing her entire world tilt. She had spent months building an important circle in her mind, a circle where she was the queen and I was the peasant. Now, she was realizing that her circle was actually orbiting me. "We should get upstairs," I said to Cade, breaking the tension not out of mercy, but out of boredom. "The chef has prepared a new pacing for the menu." "Lead the way," Cade said. I walked toward the VIP elevators. The group trailed behind me. The dynamic had shifted physically. I was in front. Jamal was beside me. Cade was flanking me. My family was behind us, struggling to keep up. We reached the elevator bank. There were 3 cars. 2 were for general guests. The third, set apart by a brass recessed archway, was the owner's lift. It had no buttons on the outside, only a black glass panel. Brielle stepped toward the general elevators. "No," I said. "We will take this one." I raised my hand. I did not touch the panel. The RFID chip in my access card, tucked inside my clutch, communicated with the reader. The panel flashed green. A soft chime sounded a distinct, melodic tone that was different from the other elevators. The heavy brass doors slid open smoothly. I stepped inside. The interior was paneled in dark walnut and mirrored glass. It was intimate. It was designed for privacy, for closing deals, for silence. Elaine hesitated at the threshold. She looked at the small space, then at me. She knew that once those doors closed, there would be no audience to perform for. There would just be the truth. "Get in." "Mother," I said, "Dad is waiting." She stepped in. Derek followed, looking at his shoes. Brielle came last. She walked to the back corner, pressing herself against the handrail as if she wanted to merge with the wall. Jamal stepped in last. He stood by the control panel, his back to the door, his presence massive and unavoidable. The doors slid shut. The sound of the world outside was cut off instantly. The only sound was the soft hum of the lift beginning its ascent to the 42nd floor. The air in the elevator felt thin. The mirrored walls reflected us back at ourselves, infinite versions of my family looking terrified, and infinite versions of me standing still. I watched Brielle in the reflection. She was vibrating. Her hands were clenching and unclenching around her gold clutch. She was looking at the back of my head with a mixture of hatred and confusion that was boiling over. She was not smart enough to stay quiet. Elaine knew how to wait, how to strategize. Brielle only knew how to react. The panic was making her stupid. How she whispered. I did not turn around. I watched her eyes in the mirror. "How what?" I asked. "How did you get the restriction lifted?" she demanded. Her voice rose, cracking under the pressure. "I spoke to the manager myself. I watched him type it in." "Brielle." "Stop," Elaine hissed. "No," Brielle shouted. She pushed off the wall. "I was clear with them. I told them you were a liability. I told them to block you. I put your name in the file myself." The confession hung in the air, loud and undeniable. She wasn't claiming it was a mistake anymore. She wasn't claiming they didn't know. She was admitting, in front of the head of security and her own mother, that she had actively, maliciously engineered my humiliation. I turned around slowly. "You put my name in the file." I repeated. "Yes," she said, her chest heaving. "Because you do not belong here. You are ruining everything. Do you know how hard I worked on this? Do you know who I am trying to impress?" She stopped. She realized what she had said. She realized she had just admitted that the dinner was about her, not Dad. Elaine closed her eyes. She looked pained. She knew the damage was done. The happy family narrative was dead on the floor of the elevator. I looked at Brielle. I didn't feel angry. I felt a cold, clinical satisfaction. "You tried to restrict the owner from entering her own building." I said, "Do you have any idea how much paperwork you just created for yourself?" Brielle opened her mouth to scream something else, but a sharp electronic buzz cut through the air. It was Jamal's phone. It wasn't a text notification. It was the specific, urgent alert tone reserved for perimeter breaches or high-level authorization requests. Jamal pulled the phone from his pocket. He looked at the screen. His eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the equivalent of a gasp for anyone else. He looked up at me. "Ms. Kelly," he said, "we have a situation at the secondary access point on the 35th floor. The 35th floor. That was not the restaurant. That was the server level. It was where the hardline data connections for the building's commercial tenants were housed. It was also where the private secure lounge was located, a room used for high-stakes negotiations that required a Faraday cage environment." "Who is it?" I asked. "A Mr. Grant Holbrook." Jamal read from the screen. Brielle gasped. Jamal continued. He is requesting access to the secure lounge. He claims to have authorization from the family point of contact. He says he needs to set up a presentation. I looked at Brielle. Her face had gone from red to a terrifying shade of gray. Grant Holbrook was her fiancé. He was supposed to be parking the car. "Why is your fiancé on the server floor?" "Brielle," I asked. She couldn't speak. She looked at Derek. Derek looked at the floor. Suddenly, the pieces fell into place. The text message, the restriction note, the desperate need to keep me out of the building. It wasn't just about embarrassment. It wasn't just about my old car or my clothes. Grant Holbrook wasn't setting up a birthday slideshow. The secure lounge on the 35th floor had a direct hard line to the trading terminals. It was the only place in the building where you could execute a high-value transfer without hitting the external firewall immediately. If they were meeting Harlan Cade, and Derek was under review, and Brielle needed funding, they weren't just selling influence. They were trying to force a deal. They were trying to corner my father into signing a personal guarantee, likely using the pressure of the birthday and the presence of the Marrows to guilt him into it. And Grant was downstairs getting the digital paperwork ready to be signed and executed before dessert was served. They needed me gone because I would have checked the logs. I would have seen the access request. I would have known that a birthday dinner doesn't require a secure server connection. I looked at Elaine. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the elevator numbers, praying for the doors to open. "It isn't a party," I said softly. "It is a heist." The elevator chimed. We had reached the 42nd floor. The doors slid open, revealing the warm, golden light of the restaurant foyer. The scent of roasted garlic and truffle oil wafted in, masking the stench of the betrayal I had just uncovered. I stepped out first. "Jamal," I said, not looking back. "Yes. Ms. Kelly, Grant Holbrook does not get access to the 35th floor. Keep him in the holding area and log the attempt as a hostile access request." But Brielle started. I turned on her. "If he touches a single keypad," I said, "I will have him arrested for corporate espionage. Do you understand?" She nodded, terrified. "Good," I said. "Now, wipe your face. We have a birthday to celebrate." I turned and walked toward the dining room. I knew exactly what they were protecting now. They weren't protecting their pride. They were protecting their leverage. And I had just taken it all away. The elevator doors slid open onto the private foyer of the 42nd floor, revealing a space that smelled of white lilies and beeswax. The transition from the claustrophobic steel box to the expansive, carpeted hallway should have lowered the temperature of the room, but the tension only spiked. We stepped out into the corridor. The entrance to the obsidian room was 20 feet away. The heavy mahogany doors closed, guarding the silence of the dining area. Elaine moved first. She practically lunged at me, her fingers digging into the fabric of my sleeve, pulling me toward a recessed alcove where a marble bust of a Roman senator stared blindly at the wall. "Not here," she hissed, her voice a desperate, strangled whisper. "Not in front of these people. Natalie, I am begging you." She gestured frantically toward the elevator we had just exited, where Harlan Cade was stepping out, adjusting his suit jacket and looking around with the practiced ease of a man who owned every room he entered. Behind him, the other VIP guests, the Marrow family and Trent Sutter, were emerging from the second elevator car, their laughter carrying down the hall. Elaine was terrified. She was not afraid of the police. She was not afraid of the law. She was afraid that Mrs. Marrow would see her daughter arguing with security. To Elaine, social death was the only fatality that mattered. I pulled my arm away from her grip. I did not step into the alcove. I stayed in the center of the hallway, directly under the crystal chandelier. I turned to Jamal. "Open an incident log," I said. My voice was not a whisper. It was the clear, projected tone of an executive giving dictation. Jamal pulled out his tablet immediately. "Ready. Ms. Kelly, log the entrance blockage at 1600 hours," I said. "Log the existence of the restriction note filed by Elaine Kelly. Log the verbal confession of Brielle Kelly regarding the manipulation of security files. And log the exact language used by the family point of contact regarding my status as a liability." Brielle gasped. "You are recording this?" I ignored her. Reference the camera timestamps from the lobby, the driveway, and the elevator car 3. I want a full evidence package ready for legal review by 9 in the morning. Natalie, please, Derek groaned. He was wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief that looked expensive but was shaking in his hand. You are taking this too far. It is a birthday dinner. Can we just drop the corporate act? Before I could answer, a side door near the service pantry swung open. Grant Holbrook stepped out. Brielle's fiancé looked every inch the part of the rising star. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly. His hair was gelled into a helmet of confidence, and his smile was a blinding shield of white teeth. He held a piece of paper in his hand, waving it slightly as if it were a flag of truce. There you are, he exclaimed, walking toward us with a bounce in his step. He clearly had not heard the conversation in the elevator. He did not know the ground had shifted. He only saw the guests arriving and assumed the plan was still in motion. He walked right past me, barely glancing in my direction, and headed straight for Harlan Cade. Mr. Cade Grant said, extending a hand. Good to see you. I know we are here to celebrate Graham, but I was hoping we could steal 5 minutes before the appetizers. He gestured toward the end of the hall, where a heavy door with a biometric lock led to the executive lounge, a room I had designed for secure board meetings. Equipped with hardline data ports and soundproofing. I just need to finalize those documents we discussed, Grant said, his voice smooth. The lounge is prepped. It will be quick. Perfect night to finalize things, right? Cade looked at Grant. Then he looked at me. He raised an eyebrow. I believe Ms. Kelly controls the room allocation tonight, Cade said dryly. Grant blinked. He turned to me, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he reassembled it. He looked at me with the sort of patronizing familiarity one gives to a confused relative. Oh, Natalie, he said. You made it. That is nice. He turned back to Jamal, holding out the paper in his hand. I have the authorization right here, Grant said, tapping the paper. Family priority access for the executive lounge. I just need you to key it in. Chief? We have a tight schedule. Jamal did not move to the keypad. He did not take the paper. He simply looked at it. May I see that document? Sir Jamal asked. Grant sighed. A theatrical exhale of a busy man dealing with incompetence. He thrust the paper toward Jamal. It is standard, Grant said. Brielle signed off on it this morning. Jamal took the sheet. I stepped closer to look at it over his shoulder. It was a printed document on the Varelli House letterhead. At first glance, it looked official. It had the logo. It had the formatting. It had a block of text citing emergency access protocols. But to anyone who actually worked here, it was a clumsy forgery. Jamal held the paper up to the light. This document is invalid. Jamal said. Grant laughed. It was a nervous, barking sound. Excuse me. It is signed. It is on the wrong letterhead, Jamal said, his voice flat. This is the 2023 letterhead design. We updated our branding to the serif font 6 months ago. Grant froze. Furthermore, Jamal continued, dissecting the paper with the precision of a surgeon, there is no internal reference number in the top right corner. All access requests for the secure lounge generate a 12-digit unique identifier code. This document has none. It is just a letter Grant snapped, his polite mask slipping. It is a memo. I don't need a code. I am the son-in-law. Jamal looked at the bottom of the page and the signature block. Jamal noted, it is listed as Acting Director of Events. Brielle Kelly does not hold that title. In fact, that title does not exist in our organizational hierarchy. Grant snatched the paper back. You are being ridiculous. We are family. We have guests waiting. Just open the door. Jamal crossed his hands behind his back. Family does not override protocol. Sir, Jamal said. The hallway went silent. The Marrow family, who had been chatting near the coat check, stopped talking. They turned to watch. Mrs. Marrow, a matriarch in blue silk who controlled one of the largest philanthropic trusts in the state, stepped forward. She was holding a glass of champagne, but her eyes were sharp. She looked at Brielle. Is there a problem with the amenities? Dear Mrs., Marrow asked. Her voice was sweet, but it carried a razor blade inside it. You told me specifically that if we came tonight, you could fast-track our membership application for the private club level. You said you had the paperwork ready in the lounge. Brielle turned pale. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. Yes, Brielle stammered. I mean, we are just having a technical issue with the door. Mrs. Marrow looked at me, then back at Brielle. You said you were the managing partner for the consulting firm that runs the membership committee. Mrs. Marrow said. She took a sip of her champagne. That is what you told my husband when you asked for the introduction to the zoning board. The air in the hallway became thin. I looked at Brielle, the consulting firm, the one she had applied to lease space for just 3 days ago. She was already selling access she did not have. She was trading favors based on a lie. Elaine tried to intervene. She stepped between Mrs. Marrow and Brielle, smiling a frantic, terrified smile. Oh, just a mix-up, Elaine chirped. You know how technology is. We can discuss the membership over dessert. Let's not bore everyone with administration, Mrs. Marrow did not smile back. She looked at Grant, who was crumbling the fake authorization letter in his fist. It does not look like a mix-up, Mrs. Marrow observed. It looks like you do not have the keys. I watched the scene unfold. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. The lies were colliding with reality. Then, I looked at the crumpled paper in Grant's hand. I looked at the door to the secure lounge. And suddenly, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Why did Grant need the secure lounge now? Why did he need 5 minutes with Cade and Sutter before dinner? Why was he so desperate that he would forge a document? The secure lounge had a notary station. It was the only room on the floor with a digital notary seal for executing immediate banking contracts. They were not just finalizing a membership. They were not just showing off. Grant, I said. He looked at me, sweat beading on his forehead. Let me see the signature page of the document you have in your briefcase. I said. What he asked. Feigning ignorance. I don't know what you're talking about. The document you wanted Mr. Cade and my father to sign. I said, the one you need 5 minutes for. Show me. I said, it was an order. Grant looked at Derek. Derek looked away, refusing to meet his eyes. I stepped forward. I did not need to see the paper to know what it was. I had seen this play before in the distressed asset world. It is a personal guarantee. Isn't it? I asked. The color drained from Elaine's face. She knew. She had to know. Grant didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. You are underwater on the lease for the consulting firm. I said, my voice cold and loud enough for Cade to hear. You have no operating capital. The bank, Mr. Cade's bank, won't approve the loan without collateral. So you brought my father here tonight, on his 65th birthday, to drag him into a private room and pressure him into signing a personal guarantee for your debt. I looked at Brielle. You were going to put Dad's house on the line to save your vanity project. I said. Brielle began to cry. Not tears of remorse, but tears of a child caught stealing. We were going to pay it back, she sobbed. Once the Marrows signed the membership deal, we would have had the cash flow. It was just a bridge loan secured by a retiree's pension and his home, I corrected. And you needed the secure lounge because you needed to execute the digital contract before the bank's end-of-day processing window closed at 8 o'clock. I checked my watch. It was 7:45. That was the rush. I said, that was the panic. That was why you forged the authorization. Grant looked at Harlan Cade. Cade was staring at him with a look of absolute disgust. Is this true? Cade asked Grant. Were you intending to use my presence here to legitimize a predatory loan to a family member? Grant stammered. It's standard business strategy. Harlan, we are just leveraging assets. Cade turned to me. Ms. Kelly. Cade said, I apologize. I had no idea I was being used as a prop in a confidence scheme. I looked at the group, my family. They stood there in their expensive clothes, in the hallway I owned, exposed for exactly what they were. They were not powerful. They were not wealthy. They were grifters who would sell their own father's safety for a chance to look important for 5 minutes. I felt a surge of rage, hot and blinding. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to throw them out. I wanted to tell Mrs. Marrow exactly how much debt Brielle was in, but I stopped. I looked at the incident log on Jamal's tablet. Exploding would give them a story. They would say I was crazy, they would say I was jealous. Policy was cleaner. Policy was a blade that cut without making a sound. I turned to Jamal. Jamal, I said, yes, Ms. Kelly, confiscate the forged authorization letter. I said, tag it as evidence of attempted fraud. I turned to Grant. You will not be entering the secure lounge, I said, and you will not be speaking to Mr. Cade about business tonight. Grant looked like he wanted to argue, but he saw the look in Cade's eyes and the two security guards standing behind Jamal. He slumped. I turned to Elaine. She was trembling. We are going to dinner, I said. We are going to walk into that room, and we are going to celebrate Dad's birthday, and you are going to smile. But she started. If you try to move the seating chart, I said, I will have security escort you out for disruption. If you try to pitch a deal to the Marrows, I will have you escorted out for solicitation. I stepped closer to her. You wanted a curated evening. Mother, I whispered, you wanted tight controls. Well, you have them. I am the control. I turned to the heavy mahogany doors of the obsidian room. Open them, Jamal, I said. The doors swung open. The scent of roasted lamb and expensive wine rushed out to meet us. My father was sitting at the head of the table, looking at his watch, wondering where his family was. I walked in first. I did not look back to see if they were following. I knew they were. They had no other place to go. The heavy mahogany doors of the obsidian room swung open, revealing the sanctuary my mother had fought so hard to keep me out of. It was a space designed for intimacy and intimidation. Walls lined with black velvet, a single long table set with crystal that caught the low light of the chandeliers, and a panoramic view of the city that made the cars below look like toys. The moment I crossed the threshold, the room shifted. It was subtle, like the change in air pressure before a storm. But I felt it. The service staff was already in motion. There were 4 of them. Dressed in the sharp white jackets of the private dining team, they were pouring water, adjusting silverware, hovering in the periphery. When I stepped in, they froze. Then, in unison, they straightened. The captain, a man named Henri, who had been with me since I opened the first tower, turned from the sideboard. He did not look at my mother. He did not look at Brielle. He looked at me, and he bowed his head slightly. It was a gesture of deference that no amount of money could buy. It was recognition. Without a word, Henri signaled to the other servers. A chair was instantly pulled from the wall, a heavy, high-backed chair that matched the others. A place setting was laid at the table in seconds, moving with a fluid efficiency that made it look like magic. They placed the setting not at the foot of the table, where the children sit, but directly across from the seat of honor. My father, Graham Kelly, was sitting there. He looked older than I remembered. The last time I had seen him was 6 months ago at a brief, awkward coffee meeting where he had spent 20 minutes checking his watch. Tonight, in the glow of the candlelight, the lines around his eyes seemed deeper. He was holding a glass of scotch, his knuckles white against the crystal. He looked up as the doors opened. When he saw me, his expression went from polite boredom to genuine shock. He stood up. He stood up too fast, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor, a harsh sound that cut through the polite jazz playing in the background. Natalie, he said. He looked past me to Elaine, then back to me. He looked confused, disoriented, like a man who had been watching a movie only to have the screen suddenly change channels. "What are you doing here?" he asked. His voice was not angry, but it was thick with bewilderment. "Your mother said you could not make it. She said you were working double shifts. She said you could not get the time off." The lie hung in the air, exposed and trembling. I stopped walking. I stood in the center of the room, letting the silence expand. I could hear the hum of the wine fridge in the corner. I could hear the shallow breathing of my sister behind me. Elaine had not just said I was busy. She had painted a picture of a struggling, blue-collar daughter who was too chained to her hourly wage to celebrate her father. She had used my absence to build pity for herself and to lower expectations for me. I did not look at Elaine. I kept my eyes on my father. "I am here, Dad," I said. I was always coming, behind me. Elaine made a noise, a sharp, desperate inhale. She rushed past me, her silk dress rustling frantically. She moved toward the table, her hands fluttering like nervous birds. "She decided to surprise us," Elaine announced, her voice pitched too high, cracking at the edges. She laughed, but it sounded like glass breaking. "Look at that. Graham, a surprise. We thought she was busy, but she made it. Sit down, everyone. Sit down." She was trying to sweep the shards of her script under the rug while everyone was watching, but the audience was not buying it. Harlan Cade walked past me and took his seat near the center of the table. He did not sit down immediately. He remained standing, looking at me. "Ms. Kelly," Cade said, his voice deep and authoritative. "Before we begin, I instructed my assistant to send over those dates for the portfolio review. I know your calendar is tight, but if you have an hour next Tuesday, I would appreciate your eyes on the downtown expansion project." He was not speaking to the daughter. He was speaking to the peer. He was asking for time on my calendar in front of the man who had told me I would never be more than service. Trent Sutter, the managing partner of the law firm, nodded in agreement. "I would second that." Sutter added, "We need to discuss the zoning updates for the North Quarter. Your team has been running circles around my associates. Natalie, I would like to know your secret." My father looked at Cade, then he looked at Sutter, then he looked at me. He blinked, trying to reconcile the daughter he thought he knew the failure with the woman these powerful men were treating like royalty. Elaine saw the shift. She saw the narrative slipping through her fingers like sand. Panic made her reckless. She leaned toward Mrs. Marrow, shielding her mouth with her hand, but whispering loud enough for the table to hear. "She is going through a phase," Elaine whispered. "She is very unstable right now, impulsive. We try to humor her, but honestly, it is exhausting." She tapped her temple significantly. I watched Mrs. Marrow. The woman was a shark in pearls. She looked at Elaine, then she looked at me. She did not look convinced. She looked uncomfortable. I did not scream. I did not throw a drink. I did not argue emotionally. In my world, emotion is weakness. In my world, documentation is the only weapon that matters. I turned to the door. "Jamal," I said. The head of security stepped into the light. He held his tablet against his chest. His presence in the dining room was unusual, jarring. Security stays in the shadows unless there is a threat. "Yes, Ms. Kelly, please clarify the timeline of events for the room," I said. "My mother seems to be under the impression that my arrival is an impulsive act of instability. I would like the record corrected." Jamal nodded. He tapped the screen. He did not look at the guests. He read from the official log, his voice flat and factual. "At 8:15 this morning, a text message was sent from Elaine Kelly instructing you not to attend. At 1600 hours, Brielle Kelly attempted to physically block the entrance to screen guests. At 1610, a restriction note was filed by Elaine Kelly in the security database, labeling Natalie Kelly as a hostile threat to be removed." The room went dead silent. My father slowly sat back down in his chair. He stared at his wife. "Elaine," Dad whispered, "you filed a restriction note against your daughter." Elaine went pale. It was a misunderstanding. "Graham, the system is complicated," Jamal continued. "Relentless as a metronome. At 1930 hours, Mr. Grant Holbrook attempted to access the secure trading lounge on the 35th floor using a forged authorization document. The document purported to be signed by the event's director, a position that Brielle Kelly does not hold. Grant Holbrook, who had been trying to make himself invisible near the window, suddenly became the focal point of the room. Grant Dad asked. His voice was harder now. "Why were you trying to access the trading lounge?" Grant stammered. He loosened his tie. I just needed to check some emails. Graham, work never stops. Right?" Jamal looked up from the tablet. The access request was flagged as a high-priority transfer setup. Jamal stated, "The system logs indicate an intent to execute a digital notary session for a secured lending agreement. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Harlan Cade placed his napkin on the table. He looked at Grant with cold, dead eyes. "You were going to execute a lending agreement tonight?" Cade asked softly. "And you wanted 5 minutes with me and Graham alone." The donors the Marrow family pulled back. They physically leaned away from Betrayal and Elaine. In the world of high finance, eccentricity is tolerated. But fraud is a contagion. They smelled the risk. They realized that the charming consulting firm and the connected family were a facade for desperation. Dad looked at me. He looked broken. He looked like a man waking up from a long, comfortable dream into a harsh, cold morning. "They told me you did not want to come," he said to me. His voice cracked. I walked over to him. I moved around the table, past the silent guests, past the frozen staff. I stood next to his chair. I opened my clutch. I took out the plain white envelope. I did not wrap it. I did not put a bow on it. I placed it on the placemat in front of him, right next to his untouched scotch. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said. He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. "What is this?" "Open it," I said. He picked it up. His hands were shaking. He tore the flap open and pulled out the single document inside. He put on his reading glasses. I watched his eyes scan the paper. I watched the confusion turn to shock, and then to disbelief. "It is a deed release," he whispered. "I bought the mortgage note on your house 2 years ago," I said quietly, so that only he could hear the details, though the room was silent enough to catch every word. "I bought it through a shell company so you would not know it was me. I didn't want you to feel indebted." He looked up at me, his eyes watering. You own the house. I own the debt," I corrected. "And as of this moment, I have marked it as paid in full. The house is yours, Dad, free and clear." I turned to look at Grant and Betrayal. "And because the house is now fully titled in your name with no outstanding lien," I continued, my voice hardening, "it cannot be used as collateral for a bridge loan without a 30-day title search." I looked at Grant. "Even if you had forced him to sign that guarantee tonight," I said, "the bank would have rejected it tomorrow morning. The asset is locked. You cannot leverage what he does not technically owe anymore." Grant slumped against the wall. The trap had been snapped shut, but not on my father. It had snapped on them. Betrayal let out a sob. It was a small, pathetic sound. Dad looked at the paper. He ran his thumb over the seal. He looked at Elaine. "You knew Dad asked her. You knew they were going to make me sign something." Elaine looked down at her plate. She picked up her fork, her hand trembling violently. "We have to eat," she said, her voice thin and reedy. "The food is getting cold. Let's just eat." She was still trying to pretend. She was still trying to play the game. I put my hand on my father's shoulder. He covered my hand with his own. His grip was tight. I looked around the table. The Marrows were watching me with respect. Cade was nodding slowly. The staff was waiting for my command. I signaled to Henri. "Pour the wine," I said. I looked at my mother. I looked at my sister. I looked at the man who had tried to sell my father's future. "Dinner continues," I announced. "The standards of this house stay in place, but the manipulation ends tonight." I walked to the empty chair at the head of the table, opposite my father. I sat down. I unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap. "Shall we begin?" I asked. The dinner service continued inside the obsidian room, a surreal pantomime of a celebration where everyone knew the script had been burned but continued to recite their lines anyway. The clinking of silverware against fine china sounded aggressive in the silence. My mother was manic, complimenting the floral arrangements to Mrs. Marrow with a desperate intensity, trying to drown out the reality of what had just happened. I could not sit there and watch her suffocate the truth with small talk. I placed my napkin on the table, stood up, and signaled to Henri to keep the wine flowing. Then I walked toward the floor-to-ceiling glass doors that led to the south terrace. I stepped out into the night. The wind at 42 stories up is not like the wind on the street. It is cleaner, sharper, and carries a hollow sound as it whips around the steel skeleton of the city. I walked to the glass railing and looked down. Charlotte was a grid of amber and white lights. a circuit board of ambition and commerce. From up here, the cars were just pulses of electricity, and the people were invisible. The heavy door slid open behind me, then clicked shut, sealing off the noise of the dining room. I did not turn around. I knew the footsteps. They were shuffling, hesitant, lacking the heavy, performative stride of a man trying to impress. "It is cold out here," my father said. I wrapped my arms around myself, not for warmth, but to hold the structure of my composure together. "The heaters are on." "Dad," I said, "it is 70 degrees on this terrace." He moved up beside me. He did not look at the view. He looked at the reflection of the room behind us in the glass. He was watching Elaine. He was watching Brielle, who was frantically typing on her phone under the table, likely trying to find a way to spin this disaster to her social media following. "How long?" he asked. His voice was quiet. It was stripped of the bluster he usually wore like armor. "How long have you been?" This he clarified, gesturing vaguely at the building, at the skyline, at the invisible empire I had wrapped around us. I looked at him. I saw the gray in his temples. I saw the way his shoulders slumped, the posture of a man who had spent decades carrying the weight of other people's expectations. 7 years. I said, "I started Northvale 7 years ago. I bought this building 4 years ago. We broke ground on the renovation 18 months later." He shook his head slowly. "You own the building," he whispered. "Not just a unit. The tower." I nodded. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. The hurt in his voice was real. "Why did you let me think you were struggling? Why did you let your mother send you those grocery store gift cards?" I turned to face him fully. The wind caught a loose strand of my hair, whipping it across my face. "Because I told you 10 years ago." "Dad," I said. He flinched. "I sat at your kitchen table." I continued, keeping my voice steady. "I showed you a business plan. I showed you the research. I asked you for an investment. I did not ask for a handout. I asked for respect." I took a breath. The memory was old, but the scar tissue was still sensitive. "And you laughed." I said, "You told me I was soft. You told me I was service. You told me to go find a husband because I did not have the head for ownership." He looked down at his hands, resting on the cold steel of the railing. "I was trying to protect you," he said weakly. "Business is hard. Natalie, it eats people. I didn't think you could handle the sharks." "No," I said. "You didn't think I could handle them because I wasn't Brielle. You didn't think I could handle them because Mom told you I was the weak one." He didn't deny it. That was the most painful part. He didn't argue. I suspected. He admitted softly. "Over the years, there were moments. The way you talked about the market, the shoes you wore. I know quality leather when I see it, but it was easier to believe Mom." I finished for him. He nodded. "It was peace. Natalie, if I admitted you were successful, Elaine would have taken it as an attack on Brielle. You know how she is. She needs Brielle to be the star. If you shine, she feels like she failed. So I let her manage the story. I chose peace over the truth. I looked through the glass. Elaine was laughing at something Trent Sutter said, touching his arm with a familiarity that made him pull back slightly. She was still working the room. She was still hustling. Tonight was not a birthday dinner. "Dad," I said. He sighed. "I know. It felt produced. It was a marketplace." I said. "It was a trade show. And you were the inventory." He looked at me sharply. "What do you mean?" I pointed at Grant Holbrook, who was sitting at the table inside, staring into his wine glass like it contained the antidote to his career suicide. "Grant and Brielle are insolvent." I said, "The consulting firm is a shell. They have zero revenue. They have burned through whatever capital they had on leases and branding. They are drowning." "Dad," he looked horrified. "But the car, the clothes, leased," I said, "on credit. And the credit has run out. That is why they needed tonight. That is why they needed the Marrows here. They needed to look successful to get the next loan." I paused, letting the next words gather weight. "And when the optics weren't enough," I said, "they decided to use you." "I don't understand," he said. "The document Grant wanted you to sign in the secure lounge," I explained. It wasn't a birthday card. It wasn't a retirement plan. It was a personal guarantee. I watched the realization hit him. I watched the blood drain from his face as he understood the mechanics of the trap. They were going to make you co-sign for a commercial line of credit. I said, they were going to leverage your home, the home I just paid off, for you to secure a loan for a business that is already dead. He gripped the railing. They would have taken the house if the business failed. Yes, the bank would have foreclosed on you within 6 months. You would have been on the street at 65. He turned his back to the window. He could not look at them anymore. He looked at the city lights, his breathing shallow and ragged. On my birthday, he whispered. They were going to take my house on my birthday. I moved closer to him. I did not hug him. He did not need comfort right now. He needed clarity. I am not asking you to pick sides. Dad, I said, I am not asking you to divorce Mom or disown Brielle. That is not my place. Then what do you want? He asked. I want you to stop letting love be a leash. I said, I want you to stop pretending that their manipulation is affection. I want you to wake up, because next time, I won't be there to intercept the document. Next time, you will sign it. And next time, you will lose everything. He closed his eyes. Tears leaked out from under his lids. I am so sorry. Natalie, he said, don't apologize to me. I said, apologize to yourself for thinking you deserved this. The glass door slid open again. It wasn't a guest. It was Rosa Ibarra. She moved with the silence of a ghost. She held a tablet against her chest. She stepped onto the terrace, nodding respectfully to my father, then turned to me. Ms. Kelly, she said softly. Report, I said. My father watched us. He was seeing the dynamic for the first time, the way my director of operations stood at attention, the way I gave orders, the way the building bent around my will. The leasing department has formally rejected the application for Brielle's consulting firm, Rosa said. The denial notice was just sent to her email. We cited insufficient capital and the incident log regarding the security breach. Good, I said. Furthermore, Rosa continued, I received a notification from the compliance officer at First City Trust. It seems Mr. Cade made a phone call from the table 5 minutes ago. I glanced inside. Harlan Cade was checking his phone. Derek Shaw's review has been expedited, Rosa said. He has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into his lending practices. His access to the bank's trading platform has been suspended effective immediately. My father gasped. Derek lost his job. He lost his access. I corrected. The job will follow once they audit his files. Rosa looked at me, and regarding the incident log, the restriction note. Process it, I said. File the full report. I want the blockage at the door, the forged document, and the harassment documented in the corporate archive. If they ever try to sue or spin a story to the press, I want the video evidence ready to drop. Everything by policy. Rosa asked. Everything by policy. I confirmed. No exceptions. Rosa nodded and slipped back inside. My father looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. You are destroying them, he said. No, Dad, I said, I am just letting the consequences arrive. I stopped catching them. That is all. I looked back through the glass. Elaine was standing up now. She was tapping her glass with a spoon, calling for a toast. She was smiling that bright, terrible smile. She was raising a glass to the husband she had tried to sell. In the building she had tried to ban her daughter from. She thinks she can fix this. I said, she thinks if she smiles hard enough, the truth will go away. Will she apologize? Dad asked. I looked at her. I saw the calculation in her eyes. I saw the way she was already positioning herself next to Mrs. Marrow, probably trying to explain away the confusion with the security guard. No, I said, she won't apologize. She is going to double down. She is going to try to rewrite reality again. I turned to the door. But this time, I said, I have the pen. Come inside. Dad, it is time to cut the cake. I opened the door and the noise of the party rushed back out to meet us, the laughter, the music, the sound of a family shattering under the weight of its own lies. My father straightened his jacket. He wiped his eyes. He looked at me one last time, and for the first time in my life, He didn't look at me like a child. He looked at me like I was the only thing standing between him and the abyss. We walked back in. The air was warm, but the war was far from over. The final bill was about to be presented. The servers moved in to clear the main course, their white gloves flashing under the crystal chandeliers. The rhythm of the room had returned to a superficial normalcy, but the energy had fundamentally shifted. The air was no longer charged with celebration. It was heavy with the suffocating weight of pending judgment. My mother, Elaine, waited until the staff had retreated to the pantry before she made her move. She did not approach me with the aggressive confidence she had displayed in the driveway. She moved sideways, sliding her chair back and coming around the table to where I sat. She leaned down, pretending to admire the centerpiece, but her voice was a sharp, frantic hiss, directed solely at my ear. "Say something nice about Brielle," she whispered. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. I looked up at her. Her eyes were wide, darting toward the Marrow family, who were currently checking their watches. "Fix this, Natalie," Elaine pleaded. "Help her save face. Just tell Mrs. Marrow that the security issue was a glitch. Tell her that Brielle has the authority she claimed. You are the owner. If you say it is true, they will believe it." She was asking me to spend my credibility to purchase a life raft for the sister who had tried to drown me. She wanted me to lie to a major donor and a powerful bank executive just so Brielle could keep playing pretend for another hour. I placed my water glass down on the coaster. I turned my head slowly to look my mother in the eye. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the weight of a gavel. Elaine flinched. "Natalie, please, she is your sister. I am not doing this to her." "Mother," I said, "she did this to herself, and I will not lie to protect your story." I turned away from her, breaking the connection. I looked toward the end of the table where Grant Holbrook was trying to make himself invisible. It was too late. Jamal had re-entered the room. He did not come with a team this time. He came alone, walking with the silent, terrifying grace of a predator who has already cornered its prey. He walked past the guests, past my father, and stopped directly behind Grant's chair. "Mr. Holbrook," Jamal said. His voice was low, courteous, and absolutely final. Grant jumped. He looked up, his face a mask of sweating panic. "Yes, we have completed the review of the document you presented at the security checkpoint," Jamal said. "Due to the fraudulent nature of the access request and the attempted unauthorized entry into a secured trading floor, we require you to vacate the premises immediately." Grant looked at the table. He looked at Harlan Cade. He looked at Brielle. He was looking for an ally. He found none. Cade was studying the label on the wine bottle, refusing to make eye contact. Brielle was staring at her lap, paralyzed by her own exposure. I have not finished my dessert," Grant stammered. "We have boxed it for you," Jamal said. "It is waiting at the valet stand along with your vehicle. If you do not accompany me voluntarily, we will be forced to involve the municipal authorities regarding the forgery." It was a bluff I had not called the police yet, but Grant did not know that. He pushed his chair back. The sound of wood scraping on wood was the only noise in the room. He stood up. He did not say goodbye. He did not look at my father. He simply walked out, escorted by Jamal, his polished tuxedo suddenly looking like a costume he had rented for a play that had been canceled. His bluff ended without spectacle. There was no shouting. There was no fight. There was just the cold, hard reality of policy removing a contaminant from the environment. Brielle watched him go. She looked like she was about to be sick. She turned to Mrs. Marrow, her smile trembling like a leaf in a storm. "It is just a misunderstanding," Brielle said. Her voice was high and thin. "Grant gets so zealous about work. You know how men are. We can still discuss that membership application next week. I will have the paperwork straightened out by Monday." Mrs. Marrow placed her napkin on the table. She smoothed the fabric with slow, deliberate movements. "I do not think that will be necessary." "Dear Mrs. Marrow said. Brielle blinked, but the fast-track approval. "The consulting arrangement, Mrs. Marrow looked at me, then back at Brielle. We are very particular about governance, Mrs. Marrow said. We do not do business where there is ambiguity about authority, and frankly, the documentation tonight has been concerning. She did not say she hated Brielle. She did not say she was angry. She said the magic word that kills all high-level deals. Concerning? Mrs. Marrow stood up. Mr. Marrow followed suit instantly. Thank you for the dinner, Graham, Mrs. Marrow said to my father. Happy birthday. It was certainly memorable. They did not wait for the cake. They walked out. Brielle sat there, the empty chairs across from her acting as a tombstone for her career. She had lost the investors. She had lost the leverage. She had lost the audience. Rosa Ibarra stepped into the room. She walked over to my chair and placed a tablet face down on the tablecloth next to my hand. The notification has been delivered, Rosa murmured. I looked at the screen. It was the automated confirmation from the leasing office. Status update. Lease application 4092. BK Consulting Group. Status denied. Reason ethics review. Pending. Improper directives. I looked across at Brielle. Her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up. I watched her read the email. I watched her realize that not only was she not getting the office space she had bragged about, but she was also flagged in the system. She would never lease a square foot of commercial real estate in this city again, not with an ethics flag on her record. Landlords talk. I made sure of that. Next to her. Derek Shaw's phone lit up. It was a single, long vibration. Derek picked it up. He tapped the screen. His face, which had been pale all night, turned a sickly shade of gray. What is it? Elaine asked, her voice snapping with tension. My access, Derek whispered. He looked at Harlan Cade. My login for the bank terminal. It just failed. It says, account suspended pending compliance audit. Harlan Cade wiped his mouth with his napkin. He looked at Derek with the dispassionate gaze of an executioner. When a credit facility is paused due to documented pressure tactics, Cade said calmly, it triggers an automatic suspension. Derek, you know the rules. You wrote some of them. You cannot mix personal guarantees with commercial underwriting without declaring a conflict of interest. But I didn't sign anything. Derek protested. Cade gestured to the empty chair where Grant had been sitting. Intent is enough to trigger the audit, Cade said, especially when the intent involves the bank's clients in a venue owned by the bank's prospective partner. He looked at me and nodded. Cade stood up. Natalie, Cade said, I will see you Tuesday. We can discuss the acquisition then. He walked out. Trent Sutter followed him, offering a polite nod to my father and ignoring Elaine entirely. The room was almost empty now, just the family, and the wreckage. Elaine looked around the empty chairs, her prized social connections. The people she had spent decades courting had not just left, they had fled. They had distanced themselves not because they disliked drama, but because they feared infection. In their world, you can be messy, but you cannot be a risk, and tonight, Elaine Kelly had proven that she was the biggest risk in the room. My father stood up. He did not look at Elaine. He did not look at the door where the guests had vanished. He looked at the deed release sitting next to his plate. He picked it up and folded it carefully, placing it in his inside jacket pocket, right next to his heart. Graham, Elaine said, her voice trembling, Where are you going? We haven't cut the cake. I am not hungry, Dad said. He walked around the table. He stopped in front of me. For years, I had waited for him to see me. I had waited for him to look past the service entrance and see the architect. I thought I wanted him to be impressed. I thought I wanted him to brag about me. But as he stood there, looking at me with clear, tired eyes, I realized I didn't need his applause. I just needed him to know the truth. Thank you, he said. He didn't say it loud. He didn't make a speech. Thank you for the gift, he said. And thank you for stopping me. I would have signed it. Natalie, I would have signed it to make them happy. I stood up and took his hand. I know. Dad, I said, that is why I had to come. He squeezed my hand. You are not service, he whispered, echoing the insult he had thrown at me a decade ago. You are the shelter. I see that now. He let go of my hand. He looked at Elaine, who was sitting alone at the other end of the table, surrounded by dirty plates and empty chairs. "I am going home," Dad said to her. "You can catch a ride with Brielle. I need to be in my own house, the one my daughter paid for." He walked out. I was left with the two women who had tried to erase me. Brielle was crying softly, scrolling through her phone, likely deleting posts she had made earlier about the big night. Elaine was staring at the tablecloth, her fingers picking at a loose thread, unraveling the linen just as she had unraveled her life. I walked over to them. I did not sit down. I stood at the head of the table. Elaine looked up. Her eyes were full of venom, but it was toothless now. "Are you happy?" she spat. "You humiliated us. You ruined everything." I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. "I did not ruin anything," I said. "I just turned on the lights. If you do not like what you see in the room, that is your problem, not mine." I straightened up. "I have one final thing to say," I announced. I looked at Brielle, then at Elaine. "If you want anything tied to the Varelli house in the future," I said, my voice echoing in the empty room, "you go through official channels." "What does that mean?" Brielle sniffed. "It means no texts," I said. "It means no whispers to the staff. It means no calling in favors you do not have. If you want a reservation, you call the main line. If you want to lease space, you submit an application to the board. If you want to enter the building, you show ID like everyone else." I picked up my clutch. "You wanted to play by the rules," I said. "You wanted lists. You wanted restrictions. You wanted security protocols. Well, now you have them. You are subject to the same policies as every stranger on the street." I turned my back on them. I walked out of the obsidian room. I walked down the hallway, past the Roman bust, past the elevators. I did not look back. I did not need to see if they were following. They were no longer my concern. They were just guests who had overstayed their welcome. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The space was quiet now. The late-night shift had started. The fountain bubbled softly. Jamal was standing by the front desk, reviewing the night's logs. He looked up as I approached. "The perimeter is clear, Ms. Kelly," he said. "Thank you." "Jamal," I said. "Good night." "Good night, ma'am." I walked toward the front doors. 3 hours ago, these doors had been a weapon. My sister had used them to block me. My mother had used them to define me. They had tried to turn a threshold into a barrier, but as I walked toward them now, the motion sensors picked up my movement. The glass slid open silently, obediently. I stepped out into the night. The air was cold, but I didn't feel it. I felt the solid ground of the driveway beneath my boots. I turned back and looked at the tower rising above me, 50 stories of steel and glass that I had built from the ashes of their doubt. It stood there, quiet, indifferent, and undeniably mine. I realized then that the revenge wasn't the embarrassment I had caused them. It wasn't the lost deals or the denied leases. The revenge was the fact that I didn't need them anymore. Your worth is not voted on at a dinner table. It is not decided by a text message or a guest list. You have to build your own structure, and one day, you will walk through the doors you built, into the life you designed, and you won't have to ask anyone to let you in. You will just own the key. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on how Natalie handled her family. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Helena Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people. Your support means the world to us.